So today, I want to talk about doing hard things, overwhelming things, daunting projects like picking up a second language, learning to dance, getting out of debt, writing a novel, or even finding your life's purpose. And I want to share a pretty simple formula with you as we go through applying this principle to our own lives. So we're going to look at Krashens' input hypothesis and see how we can affect change in our lives by following this pattern. But first, I want to take you back a few years. I grew up in Bozeman, Montana, in a community and a family that spoke English. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I even found the need to speak a second language. And I was about 15 years old at the time. I had just got my driver's license, and I had this turquoise Ford that for me represented the beginning of my freedom. And I was working at a Chinese restaurant, and one of the guys had just been married. His wife had just come over from China, and he asked me to run some errands with her. He said, take her outside and show her American style. So I decided to take her to Walmart. And the next day I got to their apartment, and she's sitting outside, and she waves at me, and I pull up. She hops in the car, and I introduce myself. Silence. Do you speak English? I asked her. No response. So we drove in silence for a while, and we get to a stoplight, and I look over at her, and I point at my nose like this. She looks at me, and she points back at her nose, and I nod. 鼻子, she says. So I repeated it, and of course, I absolutely slaughtered that word, but she was patient. She said it again and again until I finally got it right. And this was really an eye-opening experience for me because I recognized how many opportunities I was missing out on by not speaking a second language. And it motivated me to go on and study German, French, and Spanish in undergrad, and then I went to graduate school at Washington State University. While I was there, I had a really great professor who made second language acquisition studies approachable, inspiring. And as we were discussing second language classrooms and how to make that effective in the classroom, learning that second language, he introduced us to this Krashens input hypothesis. So I+1 basically explained my world, where I is the interlanguage of the learner. It's what they're able to do in the target language. It's their foundation. And 1 is this tiny stretch of information that requires growth. So as I'm learning this, I go back and I'm evaluating my own studies, my own Mandarin learning acquisition as a teenager in an immersion setting. And I was able to see how I had to start from a place that was clear, concrete, and identifiable. 鼻子. And after I acquired that, I could add more vocabulary and grammar, communication skills, but I had to start with I and add just 1, not 1,000. So establishing this habit of constant stretching, of growth, and looking to improve really helped me as I studied other languages. I was able to acquire other languages quickly and fairly easily. And the hardest part was this little space right here between the I and the 1. And that's a scary space. It's a space that is full of embarrassing mistakes and lessons that are hard won. And I will share a personal example with you of this. It was back in my Spanish infancy days, before I really spoke Spanish well. I had a friend who spoke no English. And she called me up one day to ask to borrow these polka dot rain boots that I had. Sure, I said, no problem. What do you need them for? Now remember that this is happening in Spanish. And at this point I'm in my I, no problem. Well, she says, my son's birthday is on Saturday, and I'm having a party, which you're invited to, by the way. Oh, and it's a fiesta de traje. And we just moved way beyond my comfort level here. And I start thinking, I say, okay, she wants to borrow these polka dot rain boots. What in the world? She's going to go as a clown. Fiesta de traje. What is a fiesta de traje? Traje is a suit. I cannot imagine we're going to have a black tie event for a 2-year-old. Aha! I'm like, I get it. This must be a costume party. Great! I'll be there. So I decided to take this guy, my nephew Jonathan, And we went and we got costumes, and we decided to go as some pretty amazing rock stars. So we walk into this party, and we're all sparkles and wild hair. We show up, and it becomes really awkward because nobody else is dressed up, with the exception of my friend, who is indeed a clown. And she comes up to me, she's like, well, you look absolutely ridiculous. What are you doing? And I'm speechless, like, wait a minute, you told me that everybody was going to be wearing trajes. And she starts laughing, and she says, no, es una fiesta de traje. So she starts going and pointing at all of the food and drinks that are out there, because what you may not know is that traje in Spanish also means I brought. So this is a party where everybody is supposed to be able to say, traje algo, or I brought something. So the point of this story is that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's going to happen. And I'm not saying that the growth necessarily has to be painful, but it certainly should not be comfortable. Because in order to grow, you're attempting to grasp things that you don't understand yet, and do things that you're not capable of doing yet. Growth requires change. And that change starts here with the processes in our brain, and it goes into the muscle patterns in our body. And possibly the most difficult part is that self-acceptance as we take risks and we make mistakes. So as we are thinking about applying Krashens' input hypothesis, there are two key things that we need to think of here. Number one, as we're looking at our I, we have to be honest about what we're really at, where we're really at in our development. Because any attempt to kind of cut corners here in our self-development is only going to leave us with great big learning gaps. And it's going to squash our motivation when we crash and burn. And this is true not just for second language acquisition, but for any goal we set out to accomplish. If we're talking finances, if we're talking health, building trust in relationships, acquiring a new skill, no matter what it is, we have to accept where we are at in our I. And the second portion of this is remembering to add just one, not two, not 10, one. Our goals that we set for ourselves have to be achievable, and they have to be reasonable. And as we accomplish these goals, we have to be proud of ourselves and reward ourselves for the sacrifice of comfort that it took in order for us to achieve those goals. And as we're thinking about I+1, achieving, going on, moving forward, remember, it's no I have arrived moment. I+1 is an opportunity for constant growth and constant change. So in my life, after I finished grad school, I'd studied languages, I decided I wanted a new challenge. And so I'd been doing some blogging. I decided to write a novel. And that for me was an overwhelming, daunting task. I would sit down at my computer and think about all the empty pages that were there in front of me. So I decided to apply the I+1 principle to my novel writing. So I set a reasonable daily word count, and I rearranged my schedule. I was disciplined in my habits to carve out a little bit of time in order to accomplish that. And then I persisted through creating that novel, even when I felt uninspired or when I felt unworthy. Because remember, this +1 space is a really difficult space for all of us. But the good news is, as you persist through those ones, you acquire those skills in your I. They belong to you. They become a part of you. And that is how we systematically create change. And I think that all of us look at ourselves and say, I want to do great things. Each one of us is unique. Each one of us has goals and dreams that are different from those of any other human. And the only way we are going to be able to bring those dreams to life, to bring them into reality, is if we establish these habits of constant growth and change. And your destiny lies right here, in this awkward space between I can, and one I must stretch. Right here, right now, in this moment, this is your I. So I want you guys to play a little game with me here. Put your finger up to your nose, just like I did, and repeat after me. 鼻子. Oh, you guys did way better at this the first time than I did. You have a lot of good language in your future. One more time. 鼻子. Congratulations. You just had your first +1 moment. And an infinity of these +1s is out there, and it's waiting for you. So decide which one will be your next +1, and go and get it. Thank you.